Hi everybody, Steve here. This is another video in the series on how to create generative art. In this video, we're going to be taking a deeper dive into color. In the second video in this series, you were introduced to color, but now you know a lot more about coding, so we're going to dive in. I'm going to be jumping around some because there are a lot of different things to say about color. First, I want to show you a few functions we haven't covered yet. First thing I want to cover is this color function. So the color function takes the RGB or the HSB, those three values or four values if you include the alpha, and it puts that into a variable. So then you can fill just with that variable if you want. So here I've got RGB, blue is a 255 value, I'm filling with that color and I get a blue rectangle. If I was in HSB mode though, and I did the same three values, I'd get a white square because now these three values are HSB values. So this is no saturation and full brightness, so that's white. I'll comment out the HSB color mode. There are three more functions. There's a hue function, a saturation function, and a brightness function. And these are getting the hue, saturation, or brightness of the color. And I'm printing that here. So even though I've given it an RGB value here, if I ask for the hue, saturation, and brightness, it gives me this. So 240 is the hue for this color blue, and it's at full saturation and full brightness. There are also three values for RGB. So I'll uncomment that. So this is grabbing the red color, the green color, or the blue color from this col variable. So as you can see, it's 00255, which is exactly what we put in here. Let's say we change this to HSB and we say, let's do 240, 100, 100, which is the same color blue. And now the HSB is the same, 240, 100, 100, and the RGB is now showing 00255. So that works. I don't use these functions very often, but you might find it handy. Now I want to talk about varying colors or not varying colors. This is called Embrace the Dance, and as you can see, there's some complex colors going on here. I do have a palette here, but I'm varying the colors. So if I get yellow from the palette, and we can zoom in some so you can see that there are all sorts of different variations of yellow. Some of them are orange and some of them are green. So if we look at the Get Color section of this project, I am grabbing the hue, the saturation, and the brightness from a color table of one particular color, but I'm also adding for the hue a -8, +8 random value to that hue. And if it goes past 359, I subtract 360. If it goes below 0, I add 360 to make sure I'm continuing to vary the hue. For the saturation, I'm also varying that, and the brightness is being varied. This col vary, I believe I've got that as a random value somewhere between 8 and 15. You can do this color variance here in the Get Color section, or you can choose to do it in the code, get the color and have this be the pure color from the color table, and then in the code you could vary the color. That being said, not all projects need to have complex colors that are varied. This project is Cheery Quilts, and I did not vary the colors. These are the pure colors from the color palette. For this project, I just wanted things to be clear and crisp and to not have a whole bunch of different varying colors. So that's a choice. Do you want to vary your colors or not? Depends on the project. For both of these projects, I'm using a grain shader. Basically, what happens is we grab a pixel and we vary the color of that pixel. So if it's green, it might wind up being a darker shade of green or a lighter shade of green, or maybe it gets a little more blue, or maybe it gets a little more yellow. This is my gradient art. I want to zoom in here, and you can see that this is kind of gritty. That is the grain, and let me run another one without the grain. And if we zoom in on this one, you can see that it is quite flat. Compare that to the one with the grain. So of course you might prefer the flat look, but some artists like to have the grain. So if you do want grain, I'm going to show you how you can do that. There is something called a grain shader that was written by Dave Pagurek and Gorilla Sun, and it makes it quite easy to add a grain. You can do it in regular 2D p5.js, but it takes a while. A shader processes things a lot faster because it uses your graphics card instead of your CPU. The shader code looks very different. It's like a whole different language from what I've been teaching you. But we can copy this code and use it in our projects as long as we give credit to Dave Pagurek and Gorilla Sun. They've graciously given this to us to use. So as an example, let's add grain to this project. I'm going to go here and we're going to add a file, create a file, and we'll call it grain.js. And we're going to go over to the code and take the grain.js, and we'll copy all of this, Control A to block it all in, Control C, and then Control V to paste. Then in my sketch, we have to do a couple of things. First, we need to give the canvas a variable. So main canvas equals create canvas. So back to our sketch, instead of just create canvas, we'll add main canvas equals. Then also we need to add this to our setup. So we'll copy that and we'll add that to our setup. It has to be after you create the canvas and before you call the apply grain function. So we'll add that here, and the final step is to add an apply grain function, or to call that function. So apply grain, and let's see what we get. Vert is not defined. That is because I forgot to add it to the index. So we have to go over here and copy this, paste here. We'll put grain.js because that's the name of the JS file here. And let's try again. Apply grain is not defined. That's because over here the apply grain function has a capital G. Try again. And there we go. We got it with grain. And there you can see the grain. In the grain function, besides all this gobbledygook that we're not going to understand, there is this apply grain function that is written in regular JavaScript. And you'll see here source main canvas. This is telling the grain shader what to grab in order to do whatever it is the grain shader is going to do. So we called our main canvas, but we could be applying the grain to a buffer canvas instead. And in that case, if we called the buffer canvas CNV, then we would put CNV right here. Now on this line, you see noise amount. Right now, this is 5% grain. We could change this to 10% grain by doing this. And now you see it is a lot more grainy. And another thing to point out is right at the end, when the shader is done doing whatever it is the shader is going to do, it has to place that new image, the grainy image, onto our main canvas. So that's what's happening here. Image, grain buffer 00. Now we could put our grainy image onto another buffer canvas. So we could put cnv.image here if we want to. If you want to learn more about grain, I will refer you to this Gorilla Sun article, which is very extensive, and this will tell you everything you ever wanted to know about grain, and this is where I got the code from that I just showed you. Now you might remember I told you in the beginning to start collecting color palettes. I hope you've been doing that. If you're not, get going on that. But you should make sure that for each project you're doing, don't just use all of the same color palettes on each project. Each project is going to be different and have different needs for color. And in fact, every project I've ever done, I have reused palettes, but every one I've tweaked a little bit to fit the particular project I'm working on. This is my color palette display for HSB palettes from a CSV table. And you can see that this has a CSV table here with all the HSB colors. So if I wanted to update one of these colors, let's see, I've got two blacks right here. So let's start by copying this color here. So now we've just got a repeat of that color, but let's make it not so dull. We'll say 67 instead of 63. There we go. And that might be enough right there. This looks like it kind of goes with this color palette. So what I do with my projects, here's one of my projects. It's got a color CSV. Let's say I want to tweak this color. I'll copy all of this. Then I'll go over to my color palette table and I'll paste this in. Let's paste it in at the bottom. So there's that color palette. And then I can review it. Let's say I was working on that project and it just didn't seem right. Something needed to be tweaked. I wasn't quite sure what. Now I can look at the color palette and I can say, oh, I think this color right here needs to be tweaked a little bit. Let's give it a little more saturation. So I change that. Here's the first color, the second color, here's the third color. I can increase the saturation right here to 65. And now the saturation is changed. Now I can copy all this code and paste it back into my project. This is my project called Radiant. For this project, I've got 3 different background colors here that have low saturation. Then I have some colors here for the main object, and I have one color that is a highlight color. This yellow in the middle is a highlight color. So if we look at my CSV, and let's just copy this. This is actually what I just copied a minute ago. So we copy this here. So my background colors are always the first 3 in the palette. This is my highlight color. That's always the last color in the palette. And then these 3 colors are always on the main object, but not the highlight color. For most of my projects, I only have the first 2 colors as background colors with low saturation. Usually this color is also a main object color. If you don't want to spend time coming up with specific background colors, you can work around that. Here I pulled a color and I'm getting the minimum of the saturation and 40. So it's not going to be any more than 40 saturation. And then I also am pulling the brightness, and I wanted the background to be fairly bright, so I'm getting the maximum of the brightness and 60. One possible outcome of this is if you pull red from your color palette, it's going to give you a pink background. If you don't like pink, you're going to have to code around that. For this project, Surrender to the Dance, I didn't have any background colors. All I reserved was the last spot for a highlight color. All the other colors are just main object colors. But I want to show you something I did with this project. We'll paste one of these palettes in here. That's this last one. For this project, these colors are being placed mostly with Perlin noise. So that means that this color is going to be next to this color, and this color is going to be next to this color, and so forth. So I really paid attention not only to what colors were in the color palette, but how the colors looked next to each other. So I spent some time moving the colors around to make sure that they all looked good next to each other. In some cases, I've got 2 colors next to each other that blend really well. In other cases, I've got 2 colors next to each other that contrast really well. You might want to consider having a black and white color palette. A lot of collectors like black and white, and you might want to consider working in black and white as a practice. It forces you to focus on form rather than relying on color. Or you can limit yourself to one color. Say it's blue and you've got a really dark blue, or you've got really light blue and blue in between. I said in that previous video you could go to a website to get color palettes, and that is what I most recommend. But there is another way to get color palettes. Let's say you've got a painting that you really admire. Maybe it's Van Gogh or something, and you want to get the colors from that painting. You can do that with this color picker tool that I have that I'll share with you. So let's say we want to use this NBC logo for our colors. So I use the color picker, grab this, I can grab a yellow, then this, and grab the orange. Now I can save that palette by pressing this button. And if I pull this up, this is the HSB of these 5 colors. And I can continue collecting more palettes and hitting Save Palette. And when I'm done that, I can click on Save File. Now I can open that. And if I open this in Excel, you can see there's HSB, HSB, and here are the colors for each of those. Or I could click here and then upload a file, drag this file I just downloaded into here. And now if we look here, you'll see we have an HSB table that we can now use in our project. Or you can just copy this palette into the CSV file you've already got going. If you're making NFTs, there are some platforms that won't take a CSV file. They only take JS files, which means that you're going to have to convert your CSV table into an array. So if you have to do that, I'll create a colors.js file, and I'll start by copying all this. I'm going to hit Control A to highlight everything, Control C to copy, Control V to paste into my new file. And now we're going to convert this. I'm going to get rid of this, and I'll say color array equals open bracket, and then we're going to have another open bracket for where this color palette starts, and then we close this color palette, and then we put a comma, and then the next color palette bracket, and then close bracket, comma, and so forth until we get to the end. At the end, we're going to have a close bracket and then a second close bracket to finish the array. Now you can give this job to ChatGPT if you want. You could copy your CSV table, paste it all into ChatGPT, and say, I want you to give me an array. And you might need to describe a couple of times exactly what you want back. But you don't have to do that. For 36 palettes, it takes about 2 minutes to do this, and it might take you longer to do it through ChatGPT. But now we should talk about this getColor function that I haven't talked about yet. You need to know how to use it to get stuff from a CSV table and how to get palettes from an array. So at the beginning, I have to do a let table, and then I'm preloading the table, saying load table, colors CSV. So I've got a color CSV file here that I'm referring to. I'm saying what kind of file it is. It's a CSV file. And this header, I think that refers to this first line at the top. But anyway, we're going to wind up choosing our palette. So here's my getColor function. I'm bringing in a color from somewhere where it called getColor and there was a number in there. Then I've got the table.get, get something from the table. And what am I getting? I'm getting the row and the column. So this first one, the palette, is what row I'm grabbing, and this right here is which column I'm grabbing. So this is row 0, and this is in column 0 of row 0. This is column 1, column 2, column 3. This int right here stands for integers, so that's a function to make whatever this is into an integer. For some reason, even though these are obviously numbers, I suppose it thinks they're strings or something, and I had to use this int function in order for it to recognize it as a number. And the reason this is col1 times 3 and col1 times 3 plus 1 is because this is the first color and it has 3 items in it, and this is the second color and it has 3 items in it. So if you're asking for the second color, you're really asking for what's in the fourth column, the fifth column, and the sixth column. So that's what this is doing here, fourth column, fifth column, sixth column. So now for the array version, you can see I've got this all set up. It's called palette array, pal array. And if we look at the get color for this, we still have col1 coming here, but now I've got h equals pal array, open brackets palette, and then open brackets after that, the color that I want from that palette. This part right here works the same way as it did with that other get color. So that is it for this video on deeper dive into color. In the next video, it's going to be a smorgasbord of other functions that are useful. Everything else that I haven't been able to fit into all the other videos. This is the third from the last video, so we're getting close to the end here. Remember, you can post your art to my Discord. Like the video if you did. Love to read your comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!